quite the background music. All right, hi, GM, everybody. Good to be on the stage again. So we're going to talk about a very important topic that I'm sure is very of great interest to the gaming community, and which is digital IPs. We've got a fantastic panel right here, and so let's dive in straight. So maybe participants here. Talk, maybe start with an introduction of yourself, what your company's doing, and then what's your journey been in the Web3 space, with respect to digital IPs. Sean?
All right, thanks, Zaha. Hey everyone, happy to be here. My name is Sean. I basically lead all things consumer crypto and culture here in Mantle. So what it means, it ranges from like AIGC, identity, IP, NFT, arts. You name it, those are the purview. Used to be a huge NFT degen, so that's where the origin started from. And for the uninitiated, Mantle is a scalable layer 2 built on modular architecture. So we are EVM compatible, running an optimistic stack. What makes us uniquely different from other layer 2s is that we're actually one of the first, if not the first, to conceptualize an out DA rollup. So we're working very closely, using EigenDA to power a separate data availability layer, and that reduces the user's transaction costs significantly. Just want to do a quick plug here as well. We do have a lot of exciting stuff for Mantle. Some of the things that supports Builder is that we have an ecosystem fund, and there's a $200 million ecosystem fund that is one-to-one matched with our strategic venture partners, which is the other VCs that we are close with. And we do have also a normal kind of grants funnel program. If you guys are into consumer crypto and you guys are building in the space, I'll ask you guys to keep a lookout at our socials as well. We'll be pushing out a consumer crypto buildathon really soon. Thanks.
Alan?
GM, everyone. I'm Alan from Animoca, Chief Business Officer. So I take care of a couple of functions there. So I lead our investment teams, and we're actively deploying. Also run our portfolio team, which runs and support the 500 companies that we had in our portfolio. So people probably know Animoca more of an investor. We also had a venture studio arm where we built in-house project. Of course, GameFi has always been a big focus. About a quarter of our portfolios in GameFi. But we also look beyond that, and IP and games are some of the big areas. So look forward to the conversation today.
Awesome. Okay. Well, I just want to say first and foremost, thank you for having us on the panel today. This has been an excellent event, so it's exciting to be here. My name's Matt. I go by Dudelifts online, and I'm here representing Flow Blockchain. So Flow is a layer 1 blockchain which famously got started when CryptoKitties almost crashed Ethereum. We've gone on since then to host a lot of legacy IPs who in the States, like NBA Top Shot, NFL All Day, Disney Pinnacle. Some of the best consumer experiences in Web3 are at home on Flow. And we're very excited. In the next 3 days, we're launching EVM equivalence on Flow. So that means if you have an EVM contract on Solidity, you can launch it on Flow with no code changes at all. We're really excited for what that means for the space, and I'm looking forward to this conversation.
Yeah, no, that's great. So maybe just...
I just want to add, it's interesting you mentioned CryptoKitty, because that's kind of how Animoca got into NFTs and Web3.
All right.
We started as a mobile Web2 company.
I love that.
Yeah, loves CryptoKitty and got into it, So it's interesting that we're now on stage together.
No, that's awesome. So maybe, Matt, since you're talking about it, what role does your company specifically play in when it comes to reclaiming digital identities, and and then maybe from your perspective, why should the audience here care about this topic?
Yeah, digital identity is such an interesting concept, and I actually think it's really important to be talking about. I think it's been important to be talking about, but especially right now, right? How do we exist online? I think very simply, the fact that I cannot own my digital goods in any way, shape, or form is a borderline travesty, right? Now, can you get everyday people to care about that? That's the question. They have a free-to-use internet that provides a lot of services, which is very convenient. So one way I think that Flow has been able to push that issue forward is through collectibles that people love, right? Things like NBA Top Shot, digital pins on Disney Pinnacle. we are allowing people to exercise their digital sovereignty without them knowing it. They can collect digital goods, double tap, pay with their credit card, never know they have a wallet, but now they've been onboarded to Web3. And as time goes on, their digital identity will start to emerge more and more and more. And when they look back at their wallets, once they realize what that means, they say, wow, I've been collecting digital goods all along. And I think that's a really, we're very, very proud to play that role in people's journey to sovereign digital identity.
Alan?
Yeah, I think one of the most heard about line when people talk about Animoca or from Yes speeches is about digital property ownership, right? So he's really big on that, and I think that's kind of how we got started. I just mentioned that we got started into Web3 at all because of CryptoKitty, right? It really is a way for you to own collectible. So, we make a lot of investments in NFT, but I think, if you look more closely to now, we think identity is more than just PFP, but it's also what you do online, it's your reputation, it's your digital footprint. So with Mocaverse and Mocha ID, where we now have 2 million users, these are people that are spending time to playing games and accruing that reputation onto their digital, or onto their DID, right? And what do they do with that, right? Because think about what Mocha ID started with, which is kind of like the Star Alliance and the Asia Miles for Web3, right? So now you have a way to show people that you've been active and you have participated, right? So it becomes much easier for projects to identify who they want to reward and who they want to work with, right? So I think having this is almost like your ID card, right? So having your digital ID card where your reputation goes on it, on-chain, we believe is very important, and that's what Mocha ID is trying to achieve.
Yeah, definitely echo what the gentleman here shared previously. I think everyone here should be concerned and also interested in consumer crypto and also digital identities and IP, simply because it's so broad, right? And when you look at it, this is a problem that has been deeply entrenched in traditional businesses and industries. When you look at games, when you look at the identities, what does it represent? So let's take a step back and look at NFTs also, right? I think just a couple of weeks ago, if you guys were following, there was a lawsuit by Brian Elfry and A Song a Day Man, and they basically were seeking kind of clarity around whether NFTs are unregulated securities, and they filed a lawsuit with the SEC. And just about last week, the SEC issued a Wells notice to OpenSea, right? But when you actually look at the term NFTs, I think we have also gone a long way where the NFT natives and DGen were trying to kind of shift that terminology some time back, talking about royalties and all that kind of shit as well. And NFTs is really a non-fungible token. When you look it up on Wikipedia, right, the dictionary kind of definition of that is basically just a unique identifier on a blockchain. It's so broad that it really includes music, art, creation, the IP and everything. And what IP is really anything that maybe you have an idea. There's an IP as well, right? So it's important because I think it changes the way, with blockchain technology, it changes the way that businesses can rethink business models, and also for users themselves, right? It also is about what is the different kind of say and control in the data that you're giving out, right? And it's also about how can you as an individual then monetize that kind of creation or that kind of data footprint that you have, whether it's on the internet or on the blockchain.
So, I'll skip around, but since you talked about regulations, I've been following it, Alan. We talked a little bit about it. So, the SEC issued a Wells notice to OpenSea, which has a ton of creators there, and there's obviously everybody's seen the interaction of it. So, if a digital IP becomes an NFT, and it's traded however you decided, but then there's this big regulator that is that's issued that and is calling it a security, makes it challenging because it makes it a very uncertain regulatory climate for this. We're monitoring particularly all the companies that are in the US. How do you guys see it, and what are some of the regulatory challenges that that you guys are sort of thinking about when it comes to digital IPs and your businesses? From there, maybe Matt, start with you since you talked to him.
Oh, me. Okay. Yeah, I think, as someone who's chronically online on NFT Twitter, of course I saw the news about OpenSea. I have friends that work at OpenSea. I think what it demonstrates more so than anything, is there just needed clarity, at least stateside, on how to proceed. You know, I love. You mentioned Brian Armstrong's approach. You know, he classically talks about how they said, "Come in and register," and how to do that, right? I'm not going to sit here and LARP as a legal expert and say, "Oh, I'm going to analyze this NFT against the Howey test," which we all somehow became familiar with due to being in this industry. What I know is that over the long term, I think the ability for individuals to own digital goods will be on the right side of history. Whether that's, you know, BlackRock tokenizing securities or people getting NFTs that they want to use as their PFP. I think we're on the right side of history there. What shakes out in the meantime, I think we're all along for the ride.
Alan?
I really believe in what the ex-Google CEO Eric Schmidt was saying about regulation and new technology, which is, you know, regulate and not litigate, right? I think litigation, going down the path of litigation, doesn't help anyone, right? And I think for any new tech to come through, there's always a period of uncertainty, granted, because, you know, it is new and the regulator hasn't seen it before, but we've seen it in most open-minded regulatory regimes. This is where technology thrives, right? So I would say regulate and not litigate. And I think, as Matt said, we are looking for a clearer regulatory framework. Not a legal expert, it is hard for me to see why an NFT is going to pass, you know, and fail that Howey test. But, you know, in the meantime, you know, I think, of course, we are very conscious, you know, when we try to think about whether it's an NFT launch, a token launch, and that's just the reality of the market.
Yeah, so first off, disclaimer, right? I think like we're no legal experts here as well, but I think what I can chime in is that personal opinion. I feel like regulation by enforcement is definitely not productive, right? And when we talk about legal, there's always like this thing about like territorial jurisdiction. So what will happen as with like internet and technology as well, and also like engineering and all this kind of stuff, regulation always plays the catch up, right? And it will become kind of like a country competition and regional competition. If certain kind of region are kind of falling behind, then that will become more of like a political thing as well. And it kind of affects like the businesses and the innovation within certain region. So I do feel they like certain kind of governments are also incentivized to be more friendly with all this kind of thing. But I'll have to say that it's definitely not easy. What we see right now is that it's definitely more straightforward when we kind of draw a parallel to traditional businesses and IP, when you look at like fair use and all that kind of stuff. So for IP, it's a little bit more straightforward when you talk about like individual ownership, because this is something that's still familiar. But what gets a little bit more complex is that when you add in co-creation, when you add in co-IP and cross-IP, these are stuff that are already happening in traditional businesses. When you see, like, for example, if you guys are like anime or manga fan or games fan, you have like One Piece or Attack on Titans kind of collaborating with like Crocs or Uniqlo or stuff like that. And you even have some of these brandings on like cars, right? And you start to wonder, or even like watches, and you start to wonder, like, is this something that consumer would actually buy it on? It really depends on customer preferences. But what is complicated is because when a cross IP happens, we don't really have the rails to kind of support it robustly yet. And another thing that becomes more complicated is also when you add AI into the mix. And I think this is really interesting because you can see regulation really struggling to keep up there. But this is stuff that you gotta embrace, and you gotta have like more guidance for it, and that's where the innovation will flow as well.
No, that's great. So we're talking about trends here. I guess maybe from each one of you, what are some of the top trends when it comes to digital IP that you guys are, you know, monitoring, and maybe you want to share with the audience about that. Maybe Matt, start with you.
Sure, absolutely. Trends in digital IP, I will say first and foremost, being in Korea. I'm from the States, and I'm a big believer in cute IP. I think it's amazing. The character culture in Korea is total confirmation.
Yeah.
And I'm like, people don't want to see some strange symbol. They don't connect with that. They connect with characters, right? So it's a wonderful vehicle for brand connection, just first and foremost. As far as the trends that we're seeing, I would say this isn't necessarily with character IP, but more digital identity. Seeing things like Telegram for distribution, that's huge. And I think more so what we're seeing is that the things that exist in Web 2, which is the fragmented digital identity. I have my Apple account, I have my Gmail account, I have my Steam account, I have all this stuff. I see that starting to emerge again in Web 3. I'm concerned about it. So I'm hoping that we can work together to maybe solve that problem. I think cohesive digital identity is something that we should all be working towards. And we'll see. Hopefully we can all band together.
So it's like one digital IP just runs across all the chains and...
You know, I'm not going to be naive enough to say that everyone's going to agree to the same protocol or structure or whatever, but maybe if I could have an interoperable, composable, permissionless digital identity that different protocols and platforms and apps can build on top of, then maybe we can have something closer to a true singular digital identity.
Alan?
I think when it comes to IP and in intersection of Web3, one of the biggest disruption is obviously AI, right? So even the Web2 world hasn't really figured out how to protect IP properly, and now, you know, with AI, you know, and all the creation and the co-creation that came, how do you attribute it back to the original author? And, you know, is there a way for him or her to earn a fair share, right? So all that is throwing up new problems. As we've seen, you know, a lot of these cases are in court right now, and I think blockchain has a role to play, right? And you've seen that there are a couple of projects that's, you know, announcing recently. Story Protocol that announced yesterday. Another company in the Animoca portfolio, Core Protocol, is trying to achieve the same thing, which is to say, you know, you're a creator, you've created something. Let's say, you know, you're Taylor Swift, you had a song, someone remixed it on TikTok, but you don't get a fair share. How do you attribute it back, right? Don't think Taylor Swift is getting on blockchain anytime soon, but, you know, think of all the P2P, all the bottoms-up IP that's coming up, or all the Creative Commons IP, right? So these are out there already. How do you help them? How do you protect them? How do you help them make a fair share, right? So I think that's going to be a big trend, you know, when it comes to the intersection of IP, Web3, and AI.
Yeah, I would say like some of the trends would be, you know, kind of echoing what they shared as well. Some of the trends I would say would be like programmable IP. You know, Story Protocol was given a shout out as well, and along that with like the interoperability, right, Taha, as you mentioned. I think what we have seen blockchain is able to do is fill that gap that traditional technology aren't able to do as well. And when we talk about like the interoperability, it's definitely very ambitious because it means, you know, a passport or an identity that you could kind of reuse everywhere, right? And I think that is the end state, right? We're all trying to work towards there. But it also takes a lot of hands to clap because it's about building a universal standard. It's about the consortium as well. A lot of this is... Oh...
Everybody's trying to get attention to you, man.
A lot of this is also about like how we can make sure, you know, creators and individual users themselves, consumers, don't need to create new profiles, don't need to create new records. And you can kind of reuse that footprint that you have, right? Whether is it like social or on TikTok, or just like being a consumer, a very loyal consumer of, for example, Taylor Swift, right? You go to a concert and stuff like that. I think that's very interesting. The other layer of that is also kind of democratizing the access to opportunities on a P2P layer. So it's also about like how can we encourage more co-creation and co-IP, right? I think that's also the trend, and also about distribution. I think these are the stuff that we are kind of leaning towards.
No, that's great. So let's a slightly different topic, but related to this is around security, right? Which is, you know, it's a big concern in the decentralized space. So how would you guys assess the state of, you know, security for digital identities and IPs here? Let's start with you, Matt, again.
Hey, I'll kick it off. I would say the state of security around digital identity is poor at best, you know. I put out a tweet a couple months ago, and because I had an app-embedded wallet, I needed to export my keys into my MetaMask Chrome extension. So I asked people like, oh, hey, what's the best way to do that? my comments were filled with people saying, oh, well, I paste 3/4 of it in my Telegram drafts, and then I take the other 4 digits and put them over. One, I was just trying to illustrate how ridiculous this process was. Two, I realized that people were violating all kinds of operational security by just revealing like their secrets to me on Twitter. Now, I'll tell you how Flow handles digital security and identity. I think it'll illustrate something important. I'm not just trying to like shill our own tech here. But so we have something called, so we have the Flow wallet, and we have a feature called account linking. So what account linking does means that I have all the apps, hopefully dozens, hundreds of apps that I'm using in the Web3 space. All of them have app-embedded wallets to enable a smoother experience for consumer Web3. What I can do is I can link those wallets to my quote-unquote main wallet, maybe the home of my digital identity, right? Now, that seems a little bit scary in the fact that, okay, all of my wallets are connected to one main wallet. If you've ever had your credit card compromised, you know this feeling. You have to go replace it on every app that you use. Now, what Flow does, they have something called key cycling. So if my wallet gets compromised for any reason, my main wallet, the one that I use to interface to Web3 more broadly, I can cycle my keys immediately, avert kind of any compromise. I don't have to go change my private keys around the hundreds of apps that I interact with. That piece of security enables me to interact with Web3 more safely and more broadly. Not to mention the fact that that main wallet can be held on my phone and uses the secure enclave to treat the phone that I already have as a hardware wallet. Those coupling of features and other ones, people are building similar products, not just on Flow, but I think that idea, should really be adopted more broadly to enable us to have this true digital identity.
Got it. Alan?
I think Web3 is inherently secure. The problem is humans use it, and we are not very good at handling the security aspect of it, right? You write it on little pieces of paper, we put it on different bits of the messages. Human is the problem. The technology is not the problem, right? So that's why, I think users are not used to that kind of user experience, right? So going back to, there's been a lot of account extraction type experience, email login, that's what Mocha ID does as well. You just need to put in an email and, we do the account extraction for you. In some way it is less secure, but it's much more intuitive, and I think that's what people are ready for, right? Maybe in a couple of years' time, when people are more familiar with Web3 overall, then we can go back to sort of the holy grail, the Max's way of doing, identity security. But for now, I actually think interim solution like this works better.
Yeah, sure. So I'll share real quick. I actually have a background in software development and cybersecurity. So in terms of like security and data privacy, it's actually something that is, even in like traditional startups and businesses, it doesn't come as a first priority, or it doesn't come as the first few, because it's always about make things fast, break things, and kind of ship it, right? So people always go forward with that, and it becomes kind of like a second thought or an afterthought. And I'm not trying to normalize it as well, but I'm trying to say that this is also not just unique to like Web3 itself. I think there are definitely a lot of inspirations and parallels that we can draw with like Web2 itself. For example, like how Web2 businesses are actually kind of handling data. When we talk about privacy, right, there's like a lot of regulations as well, with like GDPR and like Europe and all that kind of stuff. And if there are very basic foundational principles, if you guys are building products and you have like a CSO, right, a chief security officer, and if it's not telling you stuff about like encrypting data on two main portions, which is like data at rest and data in transit, fire him, right? These are super basic stuff that you should be doing to protect your consumers. So I think a lot of the stuff, a lot of people that are building Web3 as well, if you guys are looking kind of like as a model to kind of model after or to reference, look into what is already available in traditional kind of companies, because security is not new, right? Security is not new as a challenge as well. Security is not new as a priority. I think there are a lot of things that we can do as well. And security is always at a trade-off of convenience, definitely. So it's always about trying to strike a balance on that front.
Got it. Very cool. So again, shifting gears a little bit, maybe like something specific with respect to your company. So maybe, Alan, I'll start with you, right? Like Animoca, fascinating company, very large portfolio of companies, and you obviously are pioneers in sort of the Web3 gaming space. What are some, if you can share, like what are some companies and tech when it comes to digital IP that you guys are excited about and are looking into?
So I think there's two aspects because digital identity and IP can be quite different things. I've mentioned that on the identity side, so Mocha ID is the main thing that we're pushing. We've got a couple of million users on that, and it really helps people build a reputation into something that they can carry across. In addition to that flagship project, we also had a couple of projects in the gaming side that is doing the same thing. Another one is called Forge, which really is the idea that you're connecting your Web2 identity, your Steam account, right, and your PlayStation account. So connecting all those accounts and bringing that identity to blockchain, and then using that to log into different games. So think of that as the Apple ID login or the Google login. And basically, they're helping gaming companies to build a loyalty layer, right? So at a higher level, at a general level, Mocha ID is doing it, and then at the next level, we also had companies like Forge that is doing it specifically in a gaming vertical. I mean, it's all about creating that asset that people can actually take across the project. And we're actually seeing quite a lot of that. We talked a little bit about Ton just now. Clearly, it's the hot ecosystem. So Animoca will be working with Ton Society, which is their community foundation, I guess, right? And they're coming up with Ton ID. So we're helping them add value by sort of sharing our data and figuring out whether it's the same user and adding that reputation layer again. Because obviously the problem that Ton has to deal with is there's a lot of users. We're not really sure if these are bots or humans and whether they're engaged or not, right? So with what we do, and if we can find out for them whether they engage with different games and different properties within our portfolio, it is a very good proof back for them, right? So trying to add value to the ID system that they're actually building.
Got it. So Matt, over to you. So, look, I think from NBA Top Shots to the Disney Pinnacle, Flow blockchain is not new to the bringing gamified experiences to the blockchain. So, from your perspective, what is Flow currently seeing as the gaps in the market, and the things that you guys are aiming to fulfill through your techs? And I guess related to that, what are some other companies that you guys are excited about? Anything you can share on that front?
Yeah, some stuff we're seeing is gaps in the market. And you did mention Top Shot and Pinnacle. And so I'll talk about those first. Because I was at a Disney conference, I think it was 3 weeks ago. I don't know, Web3 time. But it was amazing because this is the Disney equivalent of Comic-Con. We're talking tens of thousands of people. We had a Disney Pinnacle booth. Dapper Labs had a Disney Pinnacle booth. I was just there to shoot some photos. But I saw a bunch of users trying this app for the first time. Some of them skeptical. They're like, are these NFTs? And I was like, yes, they are, but try the app. They came back 3, 4, 5 times to get more pins. And there is something, maybe I'm sappy, maybe I'm a little bit of a hopeless on-chain romantic, but seeing people open packs, seeing people experience digital collectibles and having a smile on their face is incredible, right? As far as gaps that we see in the space, speaking of those, we want to see apps that compose on top of those, right? If you're building a daily fantasy app, use NBA Top Shot, right? But I'll say something we're heavily focused on Flow for the next few months is cultivating an environment that will be the fertile ground for the next killer app. We've seen some killer apps start to kind of achieve escape velocity in the space. You all know them. The news is starting to cite Web3 apps as actual sources, right? These things are starting to happen. It feels like the energy is in the air. It's ripe for the next killer app to emerge. And we believe that it'll be built by a Web3 developer. Why that matters to Flow is because Flow has the ability to scale and support that app to any scale, need, and use that it requires. So we're just excited for what's to come.
Got it. Sean, over to you. So Mantle has a network that many developers and have built their games and building new tech on. As the Web3 ecosystem continues to grow, what does Mantle have in the future, and what do developers look like right now that Mantle has to offer?
Right, for sure. So before that, Alan was talking about Forge, and I've used it. It's a perfect platform. It's great. And if you guys have used Forge, check out Game 7 as well. Game 7 have their own kind of platform for the questing and also kind of for users to kind of discover games. Both platforms are very good, so do check that out as well. I think within the Mantle ecosystem, because we are general purpose layer 2 EVM compatible chain, we really want to support the builders and the projects in terms of giving them the incentives and the support, right? And I think a lot of it is also kind of helping hackers becoming founders, picking them up from, especially when we talk about like consumer crypto, IP games. I think a lot of this is super important to catch them early in the pipeline. A lot of these builders have very, very great ideas in hackathons. But I think the problem with hackathon as a model, and it's also, again, not unique in Web3, is that there isn't a very good follow-through or follow-up model in terms of consistency, right? Which is why you see kind of more full-fledged programs like accelerators, like residencies and stuff like that. So we're trying to pick these people up from there. We have incentives, right? We're giving out grants. We have this kind of buildathons and hackathons as well. I think for the aspect of consumer crypto, we are very interested to support projects that are building like digital infrastructure for IP and also identity, right? Especially so if they're targeting the ownership layer and also the attribution layer, right? The attribution layer is super important because it actually tackles or addresses the how much control do I have over my data or over my footprint, and how much of that can I monetize individually as well, right? So we are super interested to back and support projects like that.
Got it. So last question for you guys, and a little bit, forward-looking there. So I'm interested in just generally. This has been my question. Like, how do you think about like adoption of digital IP, and like when does this become mainstream with respect to people using more and digital identities and IPs in gaming becoming more prevalent, or whether is even the path towards sort of a singular, somewhat digital identity from there. How do you see that? How do you see the adoption curve for that? Maybe switch around, start with him.
Sure. Yeah. So I'll start it off first. I think a couple of things here. First is this thing called D&D that I always like to tell my projects. It's not what you guys are familiar with if you're thinking of Dino and Duns, right? D&D to me stands for distribution and discoverability. If you are an IP project or if you're like a culture project, the main goal for you is to get your IP into the hands of as many people as possible and to get your IP in front of the eyes of as many people as possible, right? So there's this thing like the attention monetization dilemma where you want it to be as mainstream as possible, but you also have to figure out a way to create a revenue stream. But I think a lot of the Web3 projects basically squeeze the folks or the consumer very early in the pipeline. You gotta let them come in early first. And what that means is offer stuff free, right? And when you look at like a lot of the identities and NFTs in the space, a lot of people actually like to draw a parallel to it being like, like domain IDs, right? Domain names. It's less of that. It's more so of your payment address, your email address. It's like your Twitter account, your Steam account, right? And what I always ask people in project is, how much are you paying to create those accounts? Nothing, nada, nil, right? We should move towards there in terms of adoption curve, lower the barrier to entry for consumers, and then find a way to do maybe a freemium model. I think the freemium model works very well with IP as well, right? Find out what are your consumer preferences. There are certain things that some of your consumers might buy and might buy, right? And some might not. For example, some might buy like physical collectibles, some might consume like your digital IP, right? It's different. It's about understanding your customers, segmenting them properly. I think these are the gaps, and this is what I would like to see as well.
I would suggest projects to explore hybrid monetization. What I mean by that is, don't just think about selling NFTs or tokens. There are established ways. If you've got a large number of users and there are large user pools out there like Telegram and Ton, where you can monetize in sort of more traditional Web 2 ways, right? And you've seen in what Hamster and Caddison are doing. They're taking users to YouTube. They're selling in-app purchases with Telegram Star. So I would say don't just get stuck on, hey, I'm Web3 and I can only sell tokens and NFT to survive. Actually, if you've built a good enough IP or game, there are multiple ways to monetize, and I think it's actually healthier that way.
Got it.
Yeah, I think we're talking about what's going to onboard the next billion users, and what does it mean for digital identity and digital IP. I would say this event has illustrated, in my mind, something really incredible. I'm looking around the room, seeing these games, and I am incredibly impressed because they look like genuinely good games. Like that's something that gets lost on us, right? We get caught up talking about the infrastructure and all this stuff. And while that's necessary and important, they have to be good digital collectibles and good games for people to care. You know, you talked about Steam accounts and things like that. While incredibly important, I remember playing Half-Life, Gary's mod back in the day. Steam was, I don't know, it was bad. Right? The reason why people use Steam now is because there's a catalog of games worth going through the trouble, right? And so I think as builders, build products, build digital collectibles, build experiences that people want to use, first and foremost, and then they'll want to take care of those assets, right?
Got it.
That's kind of my line.
Well, we'll have to leave it right there, guys. Thank you so much for your time and the great insights, and we're back to the host.